Why did the wind sound louder than the briefing room? It wasn't the storm outside. The base was quiet tonight, a kind of quiet that pressed against your ears. It was the way every voice in the room carried except hers. Lieutenant Camila Reyes sat at the end of the long metal table, her hands folded, her lips sealed. The projector hummed. A grainy satellite map flickered across scarred walls. Men who'd fought 3-tour argued over call signs and extraction points. Someone laughed too loudly. Someone else cursed under his breath. And Camila. She traced a chipped corner of her mug, eyes steady, heartbeat slow. No one asked her opinion, not yet. Route Charlie's suicide, Major Kincaid barked, tapping the map with a knuckle hardened by years of recoil. Convoys boxed if they go that way. A corporal muttered, "She hasn't said a word all night." The words weren't meant for her, but they slipped under her skin like cold rain. Camila inhaled, quiet, deliberate. She'd been here before, underestimated, sidelined, written off. Silence was safer. Silence let her listen. But there was something she hadn't told them, not yet. Outside, a gust rattled loose tin on the hanger. The smell of diesel leaked through the doorway. Somewhere distant, a lone dog barked. Camilla's world always narrowed to small details when nerves threatened to choke her. The scrape of a chair, the tick of Kincaid's wristwatch, the way Sergeant Miller's knuckles whitened around his pen. The mission, a hostage recovery along a winding river valley at the edge of insurgent-held territory. 2 civilians, aid workers, still alive if intel was right, but insurgents had mined every crossing. Comms would be patchy, air cover uncertain. The room's energy swung between bravado and dread. Camila kept her gaze on the map's far edge, a thin blue line of water threading through brown hills. The river, always the river. She remembered another river years back when her brother's convoy was ambushed. She was just a trainee pilot then, grounded, helpless. The notification call had been blunt, sterile, casualties, your brother among them. The sound of her mother's quiet sobs was worse than any battlefield scream. She vowed quietly that silence wouldn't mean surrender again, but vows are fragile things. "Raise," Kincaid finally said like an afterthought. "Your flying point, Shadow 2, any problem with that?" She lifted her eyes. They were an amber brown that caught light, oddly soft but unyielding. "No problem, sir." Her voice was even low. Someone snorted, maybe Miller, maybe the corporal. The meeting broke, boots scuffed, papers gathered. The room emptied in a rush of voices and heavy steps. Camila lingered, alone with the map's ghostly glow. She traced the river's path with a fingertip, stopping at a bend where terrain shadows deepened. Something gnawed at her, the way the intel photo showed disturbed earth near the western bluff. Mines, an ambush route. She whispered to herself, barely audible, "They're not where you think they are." Night air bit at her cheeks as she crossed the tarmac. The helicopters crouched in rows like patient predators, rotors tied down, paint dulled by dust. She touched the Hummingbird's nose, her bird, a light recon chopper stripped for speed. The metal was cool beneath her glove. She thought of her brother's last call, his voice thin over a crackling line. "Keep your head down, Cam. Not everyone listens." In the dim glow of a maintenance lamp, Specialist Harper checked ammo crates, humming a tune too cheerful for the hour. He glanced up, offered a sheepish grin. "Ma'am, fuel topped, blades checked, she's ready." Camila nodded, "Good work." He hesitated. "You ever get tired of being the quiet one?" She almost smiled. "Quiet doesn't mean tired." Harper's grin faltered into something thoughtful. "Guess some folks confuse quiet with weak." She didn't answer, she didn't need to. 2 hours before dawn, clouds dragged low across the hills. The convoy, 3 Humvees and an armored truck, moved like dark beetles across scrubland. The Hummingbird skimmed ahead, its rotor wash bending grass flat. Inside the cockpit, Camilla's hands were steady on the cyclic. Her co-pilot, Lieutenant James O'Neill, fiddled with a loose comm wire. He was new, eager, the kind of man who filled silence with nervous chatter. "You ever get scared?" he asked suddenly. Camila kept her eyes forward. "All the time." He blinked, surprised by the honesty. The valley opened beneath them, a labyrinth of dry riverbeds and jagged cliffs. Wind hissed through canyons, carrying whispers of sand. Far below, the convoy's headlights flickered like distant stars. Camilla's gut tightened. Something felt off. The pattern of tracks in the riverbed, the absence of birds. Even the sky seemed to hold its breath. She keyed her mic. "Convoy Shadow 2, slow your roll, scanning ahead." Static answered. Then Kincaid's gruff voice, "Copy Shadow 2, what do you see?" She didn't know yet. She only knew the silence was too perfect. A flash, faint, metallic, caught her eye on the western bluff. A reflection, scope glass. Her heart thudded once, hard. She banked left, feigning a routine sweep. O'Neill's jaw tightened. "Did you see?" "Not yet," she cut him off. She needed confirmation before raising alarms. False calls eroded trust. They drifted lower, blades slicing the dawn's first pale light. The world smelled of dust and ozone. Camilla's breath fogged her visor for a heartbeat. Another flash, a glint of steel where no steel should be. She whispered, barely moving her lips, "They're here." O'Neill stiffened, "Call it in." "Not yet." Her silence wasn't hesitation, it was calculation. If she called too soon, the convoy would halt in the kill zone. If she waited too long. A low crack, a rifle report split the morning. The first bullet struck rock, sparking. Another hissed past the windshield. O'Neill cursed. Camila yanked the Hummingbird into a climb, rotors screaming. "Contact West Bluff," she barked. Her voice cut through every channel like a blade. Kincaid's voice roared over comms. Orders flew. The convoy scattered, but the insurgents had planned well. Detonations blossomed near the riverbed, cutting off escape routes. The valley erupted in chaos, dust clouds, shouting, gunfire echoing between cliffs. Camilla's world narrowed to the HUD flicker, the feel of the cyclic vibrating against her palm, O'Neill's ragged breathing. She banked hard, diving to draw fire away from the convoy. Tracers streaked past, red and merciless. "Shadow 2, you're too low," Kincaid warned. She ignored him. Lower meant bait, lower meant lives saved. A rocket whooshed past, close enough to rattle teeth. She felt the heat wash across her cheek. Her chest ached with a strange, quiet fear, less for herself, more for the faces she'd seen at briefing. Harper's sheepish grin, O'Neill's eager eyes. The Hummingbird skid skimmed treetops. Bullets snapped branches like brittle bones. O'Neill muttered a prayer, hands trembling on the console. "Hold it together," she said softly. He shot her a look, half admiration, half disbelief. "How are you so calm?" "I'm not." Something shifted in her voice, an edge of vulnerability that startled him more than the gunfire. 10 minutes later, the ambush broke into fragments. The convoy found cover behind a rock outcrop. The insurgents melted back into the hills, leaving dust and echoes. Camila circled, scanning. Her fingers ached from gripping the cyclic too tightly. "Convoy status?" she asked. "Minor damage," Kincaid replied. "Two wounded, no KIA." A pause. "Ray's good call, holding fire until confirmation." His tone carried reluctant respect. She didn't bask in it. She felt only the weight of near disaster and the knowledge that this was just the beginning. She hovered, eyes on the river bend. The civilians were still out there. The enemy, too, and something about the pattern of retreat bothered her. It wasn't random. They weren't running. They were repositioning. O'Neill exhaled shakily. "They'll write you up for that dive." She almost smiled. "They'll forget by the time this is over." But her gut whispered otherwise. As they turned back toward the convoy, dawn bled fully across the horizon, warm gold over a cold battlefield. The light caught the western bluff again, and for an instant she thought she saw a figure watching. Not firing, just watching. She couldn't shake the feeling that whoever commanded that ambush knew her name. The Hummingbird's rotor beat became her heartbeat. The valley stretched endless and merciless below. Camilla's silence wrapped around her like armor, not weakness, not fear, but the space where resolve takes root. Somewhere deep in her chest, beneath old scars and newer doubts, something stirred, a roar waiting for its moment. And as the radio crackled with clipped orders and scattered prayers, she whispered a promise, this time not just to herself. "You won't take them, not today." The wind swallowed her words, carrying them over the river toward the waiting hills. The mission wasn't even halfway begun, and already the valley felt alive, watching, judging. They still didn't know what her silence held. Not yet. Why did the valley feel smaller in daylight? The sun had only climbed a hand's width above the horizon, but the cliffs loomed closer now, their jagged edges like teeth around a waiting mouth. Dust from the ambush still hung low, a ghostly haze that blurred distance and detail. Camilla's rotor wash stirred it into swirls that followed the convoy as they regrouped. Below, soldiers moved among the rocks, patching bullet holes in Humvees, bandaging grazed arms. Their voices were subdued, too subdued for men who'd survived a trap. Relief mixed with unease. They all felt it. The ambush wasn't a failure. It was a probe. O'Neill craned his neck to look behind them. "They let us go," he murmured. Camila didn't answer. She banked the Hummingbird in a slow circle, eyes scanning ridgelines. A glint flashed, too far to be sure. She felt the river's pull, the way it bent the land like a guiding hand. She trusted rivers more than orders. Rivers never lied. Down below, Major Kincaid was a broad-shouldered silhouette against sunlit stone. He waved for her to set down. Dust billowed as she landed. Boots crunched on gravel as he approached, removing his helmet. His face was lined like dry earth, his expression carefully neutral. "Raise," he said, voice low enough that only she could hear. "That stunt diving low, drawing fire, you could have lost the bird." She cut the engine, the blade slowing to a whisper. "And half your men," she replied. His jaw tightened, but after a beat his eyes softened just a fraction. "We're heading for Delta Crossing. If they're regrouping, they'll try to box us there." He glanced at the distant hills. "I need your instincts on this." Camilla blinked, surprised. The same man who'd ignored her in briefing now sought her read. Silence wasn't always invisible, it just took time to be heard. She traced a line in the dirt with her boot. "They're hurting us. The crossing isn't mined, it's too obvious. They'll push us past it, toward the canyon mouth." Kincaid grunted. "Then we make it look like we're falling for it." By noon, heat pressed down like a weight. The convoy rolled along the river, engines groaning. The Hummingbird scouted ahead, her rotors flickering shadows over scrub and stone. Inside the cockpit, O'Neill's shirt clung to his back. He broke the silence with a nervous laugh. "You always this quiet on missions?" Camilla's eyes stayed on the horizon. "Only when the noise could get someone killed." He chewed on that. "After a moment, you ever lose anyone?" The question was blunt but not cruel. She thought of her brother, the last photo of him grinning on a riverbank, boots off, pants rolled, laughing about how the water was colder than it looked. She thought of her mother's face crumpling when the phone rang. "Yes," she said softly, "I lost someone." O'Neill swallowed hard, sensing the weight behind her words. He didn't ask more. A crackle of static broke the quiet. Harper's voice came over comms. "Ma'am, I keep seeing shadows on the ridge. They vanish when I scope them." Camilla felt a prickle at the base of her neck. "Keep eyes sharp. They're testing our nerves." But deep down, she wasn't so sure. The insurgents weren't just testing, they were reading, adapting. Whoever was out there wasn't rushing. They were patient, skilled. The convoy entered a stretch where cliffs rose steep on both sides. The light dimmed, echoes carried strangely. Camilla's gut clenched. "Major, this canyon's a funnel," she said into the mic. "Recommend alternate." A boom cut her off. The lead Humvee lurched as a mine exploded beneath its left front tire. Shrapnel clattered against rock walls. Screams followed, short, ragged. "Ambush, ambush." Gunfire erupted from above, sharp cracks bouncing between cliffs. Sparks danced across the armored truck's hull. The valley became a cage of sound. Gunshots, ricochets, the thump of boots on stone. Camila yanked the Hummingbird upward, rotors chopping air. O'Neill fired bursts from the door-mounted M240, brass casings clinking against the floor. Below, soldiers scrambled for cover, dragging the wounded. Convoy pushed forward. Kincaid's voice was iron. Shadow 2 suppress West Ridge. Camila dove low, skimming the cliff face. She squeezed the trigger, short bursts controlled. Dust and rock chips rained. The insurgents scattered, regrouping like smoke. Through the chaos, she caught sight of a single figure, taller, steadier than the rest, standing exposed for a heartbeat on the eastern ridge. Not firing, watching. He raised a hand, signaling something she couldn't decipher before vanishing into shadow. Her stomach turned cold. This wasn't random, it was choreography. The firefight dragged on 10 minutes, maybe 20. Time stretched and snapped. Finally, the echoes faded. The insurgents melted back into the cliffs, leaving behind empty shells and blood-dark stains. The convoy crawled forward, battered but moving. Camila hovered above, scanning. Her muscles ached. O'Neill slumped against his harness, sweat streaking dirt on his face. "They're steering us," he said hoarsely. Camila nodded, toward something worse. She switched comms to a private channel. "Major, we need high ground intel. Permission to break off and scout." A long pause crackled. "Granted, don't get dead, Rays." She banked the Hummingbird away from the river, climbing toward a ridge that overlooked the canyon mouth. The world opened below, brown hills rolling into endless desert, the river glinting like steel wire. From here, she could see the convoy's dust plumes snaking through the valley. She landed on a narrow shelf, killed the engine. The sudden quiet was deafening. Heat radiated off the stone. O'Neill dismounted, scanning with binoculars. Then faint, almost imagined, a sound drifted on the wind, a woman's voice, singing, low, haunting. It came from somewhere beyond the ridge. Camila froze, listening. The melody was old, foreign, threaded with sorrow. O'Neill lowered his binoculars. "You hear that?" She nodded, heart pounding. No radio chatter, no engines, just the song. It stopped as abruptly as it began. Camilla's throat tightened. Years ago, her brother had joked that war zones had ghosts, that sometimes when you thought you were alone, the dead sang. She forced the memory aside. "Let's move," she said quietly. They hiked a short way up the ridge, boots scraping stone. The wind picked up, carrying the smell of distant smoke. Camila crouched, scanning through her scope. At first, nothing. Then movement, a small cluster of structures hidden in a fold of land, a makeshift camp. A radio antenna poked from the largest shack, and near the edge, tied to a post, 2 figures blindfolded. The hostages. Her chest clenched, relief warred with dread. "They're alive," O'Neill whispered. Camilla's lips pressed thin. "It's too easy." Because if she could see them, the enemy wanted her to. They radioed coordinates to Kincaid, who replied with terse approval. The convoy would hold position while a small strike team moved in. Camila's bird would provide overwatch. As she prepped for takeoff, O'Neill's hands shook slightly. He forced a laugh. "First real op for me, and it's a trap inside a trap." Camila paused, meeting his eyes. "Fear keeps you sharp, don't let it own you." Her tone was calm, but inside, her own fear coiled tight. Not for herself, but for the civilians, for her men, for the vow she'd whispered years ago beside a folded flag. The Hummingbird lifted, rotors thundering. The world below blurred, a sunburnt mosaic of rock and sand. Camilla's mind was a still pond beneath the noise. She tuned into the small things, the way the horizon shimmered in heat waves, the faint vibration in the pedals, the smell of her own sweat inside the helmet. She thought again of the watching figure on the ridge, the hand signal, the patience. Whoever he wasn't reckless. He was waiting for the perfect fracture point. And somewhere deep inside, a darker thought. Maybe this wasn't about the hostages at all. Maybe it was about her. The idea felt absurd, but so had the song on the wind. She adjusted her grip on the cyclic. Below, the strike team approached the camp, silhouettes against the sand. The hostages' blindfolded heads turned, sensing movement. The radio crackled, Harper's voice tight with nerves. "Ma'am, something's wrong." Then the camp exploded. A thunderclap of fire and dust swallowed the shacks. The shockwave rocked the Hummingbird, alarms screeching in her headset. Flames roared skyward, devouring wood and cloth. O'Neill shouted, "IEDs multiple." The hostages, God, the hostages, Camila's heart lurched. She banked hard, searching through the smoke. Amid the chaos, figures emerged, insurgents pouring from hidden tunnels beneath the camp, weapons flashing. The air became a storm of bullets and grit. She steadied her breathing, the world narrowing to crosshairs and rotor beat. Her silence now was not weakness. It was the calm before she made her next choice, the kind that would either save lives or destroy them. And somewhere beyond the smoke, on a distant ridge, she felt unseen eyes watching, waiting. The mission had just become something else entirely. What kind of trap waits beneath fire and smoke? Camila steadied the Hummingbird as the blast wave's echoes faded into the canyon walls. Below, the burning camp twisted and collapsed, sending up black plumes that smeared the sky. Sparks drifted like dying stars. The air stank of charred wood and cordite. O'Neill's knuckles were white on the console. They knew we'd come. Camila didn't answer yet. Her eyes swept the chaos, looking for movement, survivors, anything to hold on to. Through the wavering heat, she caught sight of Harper's squad pinned behind an overturned Humvee. Bullets chipped stone near their heads, dust spitting in angry bursts. She keyed her mic. "Harper, pop smoke, I'm coming low." Static hissed then. "Copy, ma'am, green smoke." A thin green plume blossomed against the orange firelight. Camila nosed the Hummingbird into a dive. The rotor wash whipped sand and ash into furious spirals. O'Neill opened up with the M240 short, controlled bursts that hammered the ridge line. For a moment she was back on the riverbank years ago, watching her brother skip stones. He said something about ripples, that even a small stone could change a whole river's flow. His voice came unbidden. "Cam, quiet doesn't mean invisible. It means patient." She leveled out a few feet above the ground, close enough for grit to pepper the windshield. Harper's men scrambled, dragging one wounded Marine between them. Camila held the bird steady despite the gusts buffeting her tail. The green smoke clung to her nostrils, acrid and artificial. A burst of gunfire flared from a rock outcrop. One of Harper's men screamed short, shocked. Camila's chest tightened. She slewed the chopper left, giving O'Neill an angle. His rounds cracked, silencing the shooter. The team dove behind cover, hearts hammering, then hauled themselves toward the nearest vehicle. Camila climbed, rotor tips a blur. The convoy below lurched into motion again, limping but alive. But the hostages, they were gone. The camp had been bait, nothing more. 15 minutes later, the canyon swallowed the sound of the retreating convoy. The radio chatter dulled to broken phrases: "Two wounded, ammo low, keep moving." Camila flew over watch, her face unreadable. O'Neill glanced sideways at her. "They weren't even there," he said quietly. "The blindfolded figures, they were props." Camila nodded once. "Or bodies already gone cold." The words hung heavy between them. A low crackle, Kincaid's voice hoarse. "We regroup at Echo Ridge. Rays, find me a path that isn't a graveyard." "Copy." She banked east, scanning the terrain. The land here was all teeth and scars, cliffs rising like broken walls, gullies twisting in deceptive patterns. Far in the distance, the river glimmered, patient and silent. Camila's stomach ached with a familiar guilt. She hadn't spoken up enough in the briefing, hadn't pressed harder about the ambush patterns. She'd let silence shield her, but silence could cut, too. O'Neill shifted. You couldn't have known. She didn't look at him. I should have. Echo Ridge was a splintered plateau of pale rock. The convoy huddled at its base. Harper paced beside a Humvee, helmet tucked under his arm. Sweat streaked his dirt-smeared face. When Camila landed, he approached, anger barely leashed. They weren't there, he said, voice trembling. We risked everything for nothing. Camila met his gaze. Not for nothing, we learned how they think. That doesn't bring them back. His bitterness wasn't aimed at her alone. It was the raw edge of fear and failure. She let it pass through her without defense. Sometimes the only thing to do with another's pain was to hold its weight silently. Kincaid approached, eyes scanning the horizon. They'll hit us again. Maybe tonight, maybe before. Rays, talk to me, what's the play? She inhaled slowly. We can't outrun them, not through the canyon. They'll be ahead of us at every choke point. Kincaid grunted. So we go where they don't expect. Through the riverbed, she said. It's risky, soft sand, possible sinkholes, but they'll assume we'd avoid it after the last ambush. The major considered. Finally, a short nod. You lead. Night came fast in the desert. The stars arrived all at once, sharp and cold. The convoy's headlights clicked off. They moved under starlight, guided by NVG's and Camila's whispered course corrections over comms. The riverbed was a winding silver ribbon, its surface hard-packed in places, treacherous in others. The Hummingbird skimmed ahead, blades chopping the cool night air. Camila's visor reflected constellations as if they belonged to someone else. O'Neill spoke in a low murmur. Feels like we're walking into the sky. She almost smiled, or into a story that doesn't end well. The radio crackled softly, Harper, his voice subdued. Ma'am, you ever think about why you stayed in, after your brother? She hesitated, her throat tightened. Because leaving wouldn't bring him back, but maybe staying means someone else gets to go home. The channel stayed quiet after that. Even Harper had no answer. A coyote howled somewhere distant, the sound thin and mournful. Then another sound, soft, rhythmic, not the wind, not the engine, footsteps. Camila frowned. O'Neill killed the lights. He flicked a switch. Darkness swallowed the cockpit except for the glow of instruments. The Hummingbird hovered, silent but for the low thrum of rotors. Camila strained her ears. There, faint movement in the scrub to their right, too deliberate for wildlife. She eased the chopper sideways, scanning. A figure emerged briefly in her NVG's tall, carrying what looked like a long rifle, the same silhouette she'd seen on the ridge. Before she could warn the convoy, a flare arced skyward, bright, blinding. Gunfire erupted from both sides of the riverbed. Muzzle flashes strobed the darkness. Contact east and west banks, Harper shouted. The convoy swerved, tires spitting sand. Kincaid's orders cut through the chaos, crisp and cold. Camila spun the Hummingbird, O'Neill opening up with suppressive fire. Tracers carved glowing paths through the night. She felt each shot as a vibration in her bones. A rocket screamed past, exploding harmlessly in a dune. Another struck closer, rattling the frame. Too many, O'Neill gasped. Camila's jaw clenched. Then we don't fight them on their terms. She pushed the chopper low, weaving between sparse trees. The enemy shifted focus, chasing her light. In the brief respite, the convoy lurched forward, engines roaring. Bullets pinged off her tail boom. Her breath came fast but steady. She remembered her brother's voice again. Patience, Cam, and when the time comes, roar. 10 minutes of chaos stretched into eternity before the gunfire waned. The convoy broke free of the riverbed, regrouping on firmer ground. Casualty reports crackled in. 2 wounded, 1 Humvee disabled but recoverable. Camila circled above, scanning for pursuit. The ridges were empty again, too empty. The enemy was letting them go. O'Neill swallowed. They're toying with us. She nodded, or setting the board. She opened a private channel to Kincaid. Sir, We need to consider the possibility there's a leak. They're one step ahead every time. Silence crackled, then noted, eyes open, raise. Hours later, they made camp in a shallow basin shielded by rock walls. Small fires flickered, their light dancing on weary faces. Harper sat apart, cleaning his rifle with slow, methodical strokes. His usual easy grin was gone. O'Neill joined him, offering a canteen. "You okay?" Harper gave a half shrug. "Just thinking. Had a buddy once, believed every mission had meaning. Died on a run that turned out to be a feint. Sometimes I wonder if any of this means anything." Camila overheard, her chest tightening. She wanted to tell him meaning isn't always obvious, that sometimes it's just the faces that make it home, but she said nothing. Words could be brittle when spoken too soon. Instead, she walked a short distance away, letting the cool night wind wash over her. The stars looked close enough to touch. She thought of her brother, of the folded flag in her mother's hands. She thought of the civilians somewhere out there, bound, afraid, counting on someone they'd never met. The world felt impossibly vast and painfully small at once. A faint noise broke her reverie, static on her comms. She tapped her earpiece. A whisper bled through, distant but distinct. A man's voice. "Erase." Her breath caught, no call sign, no channel ID, just her name carried like a secret. "Come find what you lost." Then silence. Her pulse thudded in her throat. She scanned the dark ridges but saw only shadow. O'Neill's voice came from behind her. "Ma'am." She forced her expression neutral, just interference. But deep inside, something colder settled. Whoever was hunting them knew her name. And maybe, just maybe, this mission wasn't about the hostages anymore. She looked toward the horizon where the river snaked like a silver scar. Somewhere out there, a trap waited. Somewhere out there, an answer she wasn't ready to face. The desert wind hissed softly through the stones, a sound like a breath held too long. And Camila Reyes, silent as ever, felt the first stirrings of a roar that was still gathering in her chest. One that, when released, might hold everything together, or tear it all apart. She closed her eyes for half a breath, then opened them to a sky that had turned the color of steel. The wind shifted, carrying with it the dry hiss of distant gunfire, too far to threaten them yet, but close enough to whisper a warning. Maya Vasquez tightened the strap of her pack and glanced at the small team gathered around the burned-out husk of an abandoned truck. Their faces were gray with fatigue, streaked with soot and dried sweat. Even Novak, usually the unshakable wall of humor, had stopped cracking jokes. No one said it aloud, but they all felt it. The mission was slipping. Their extraction window had shrunk. The comms blackout was stretching too long, and somewhere beyond the ridge, the enemy had started hunting. She wanted to tell them she'd been here before, on a different continent, in a different war zone, when silence stretched so tight it felt like a noose. But she didn't. They didn't need comfort they couldn't afford. They needed direction. "Move out," she said quietly. Her voice carried anyway. It always did when it mattered. They marched north through a ravine where the sun barely touched the ground. Gravel crunched beneath boots, every sound magnified by the canyon walls. At one bend, the wind cut hard, and a sheet of dust stung her cheeks. The others pulled scarves over their faces. Maya just squinted and kept walking, one hand brushing the jagged rock, grounding herself. Inside, though, a tremor of doubt flickered. What if she'd misread the satellite intel? What if the narrow path she'd chosen as a shortcut was exactly where the enemy would corner them? The thought dug at her, but she buried it. Doubt was a luxury she'd lost years ago, back when hesitation had cost lives she still saw in dreams. At dusk, they reached a plateau overlooking the valley. The world below looked deceptively peaceful, a broad stretch of dry riverbed dotted with scrub brush and shattered walls of old mud brick homes. Smoke rose in thin threads far to the east. Somewhere out there was the supply cache they'd been sent to retrieve. Medical packs, encrypted drives, and a black case no one but Maya had clearance to open. Reed set down his rifle and sank to a knee, scanning the horizon through his scope. "Nothing moving," he said, though the unease in his tone betrayed him. "Which is worse," Novik muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. "Means they're waiting." Maya knelt beside them. She studied the terrain through her binoculars, tracing possible routes, escape angles, kill zones. The silence stretched again, thick, oppressive. Then, faint but sharp, a crack echoed through the valley. A single shot. It wasn't aimed at them. Not yet. The team stiffened. "Sounded like a warning," Reed whispered. "No," Maya said, voice low. "Sounded like an invitation." She made the call to wait for darkness. It was a gamble, but moving under the stars might give them the edge. As night fell, the temperature plummeted. Breath misted in front of their faces. The sky unfolded into a map of stars so clear it almost felt cruel, beauty untouched by the chaos below. While the others tried to grab a few minutes of rest, Maya stayed awake, crouched beside a boulder. She watched the valley for movement, her ears tuned to every rustle of wind. In that quiet, the past slipped in uninvited. She saw her younger brother's grin, the one frozen in the last photograph before he'd shipped out. She remembered the call that came after, the way her mother's voice broke. That was the day silence stopped being peace for her. It became a wound. Novik stirred beside her. "You don't sleep much, do you?" he asked softly. "Not when it matters." He studied her face in the starlight. "You ever wonder why you keep saying yes to missions like this?" She didn't answer right away. Her fingers traced the edge of her rifle's handguard. "Because someone didn't come home, and I can't stand the thought of another mother hearing that knock on the door." Novik nodded, looking away. He didn't press further. They both knew some things stayed unspoken. At midnight, they descended into the valley, moving low and quick. The air smelled of dust and distant smoke. Shadows shifted like living things, every corner a potential threat. As they neared the coordinates, Reed froze and raised a fist. Everyone dropped silently. Ahead, two figures slipped between ruined walls, their silhouettes backlit by a sliver of moon. Maya gestured, "Two enemies, light patrol." She signaled Novik to flank left. The world shrank to heartbeats and breath. A pebble rolled under her boot, skittering across stone. One of the figures stopped, head turning sharply. A moment's stillness. Then motion. The fight was over fast. Novik's suppressed shot dropped the first. Maya tackled the second before he could fire, the struggle brief and brutal. When it was done, she crouched in the dark, chest heaving, the world buzzing with adrenaline. Her silence had concealed her approach, her silence had saved them. But it was also the silence after the kill that cut deepest. She felt it settle heavy in her chest. They reached the cache just before dawn. The crates were half buried under rubble, scorched and battered but intact. Reed pried open the first. Relief flickered through the team as they uncovered the medical packs. But the black case, the one Maya had been sent for, wasn't there. Her stomach sank. She checked again. Nothing. A cold wind whispered through the broken walls, stirring ash. Novik swore under his breath. Someone got here first. Maya's mind raced. There was only one group with intel on this drop, which meant betrayal. She didn't voice it, not yet. Instead, she picked up a shard of twisted metal, turning it in her gloved hands. The edges were still warm, recent. The enemy hadn't just stumbled onto the cache. They'd been tipped off. Behind her, Reed spoke quietly. "What now?" She slipped the shard into her pocket, eyes narrowing at the horizon. "Now," she said, "we find out who's playing both sides." The wind carried away her words, leaving only silence. The kind that wasn't weakness at all, but the weight before a storm. She could taste the grit of the desert on her tongue when the first light crept over the horizon. The night had felt endless, a stretch of darkness that gnawed at her nerves, but dawn didn't bring relief, it brought exposure. From here on out, every move would be visible. Maya Vasquez crouched behind a jagged outcropping, watching her small team pack up what little they'd salvaged. Reed's hands shook slightly as he cinched the straps on his pack. Novik's usual grin was gone, replaced by a tight line across his face. Even Taran, the quiet comms specialist, kept glancing over her shoulder as if the wind itself might betray them. The missing black case haunted her. She turned the possibility over and over in her head. Either someone high up had leaked the coordinates or someone close had. The idea made her chest tighten. She didn't tell the others. Not yet. Trust was fragile and suspicion was a poison that could kill them faster than an ambush. Still, she could feel it under her skin, a splinter she couldn't remove. As they moved out, the valley spread before them like a giant scar. The air shimmered with heat though the morning was still young. A flock of birds erupted from the ruins ahead, startled into flight. Maya froze. So did the others. "Eyes up," she whispered. The ambush didn't come. Not yet. But the air felt wrong, as if the world was holding its breath. By mid-morning they'd reached a narrow defile between two cliffs. Reed hesitated at the entrance. "Feels like a choke point," he said. "It is," Maya replied, "but it's the fastest way." Novik shot her a look. Fastest isn't always smartest. She met his gaze, unflinching. "We don't have time for detours." They entered single file. The walls rose on either side, ancient stone carved by centuries of wind. Their footsteps echoed faintly, too loud in the stillness. Maya's pulse thudded in her ears. Halfway through, a small rock tumbled from above, bouncing off the wall to land near her boot. She stopped. "Keep moving," Taran whispered. Another rock fell, then the world erupted. Gunfire shattered the canyon's quiet. Bullets sparked against stone, kicking up dust. The team dove for cover, pressed flat against the canyon walls. The air filled with the metallic tang of spent rounds and the sharp crack of rifles. Maya's mind went white-hot, all instincts. She signaled with two fingers, pointing Reed toward a ledge and Novik to the right flank. Her own rifle braced against her shoulder. She squeezed off 3 controlled shots. 2 targets dropped. For a moment the world narrowed to the rhythm of fire and reload, fire and breath. Then silence. It came sudden and complete, almost deafening. Dust drifted through the shafts of sunlight cutting the canyon. Maya rose cautiously, scanning for movement. None. She could feel her heart pounding against her vest. Novik climbed down from a rock. "They were waiting for us," someone told them. Reed's jaw tightened. "Has to be someone back at command." Maya didn't answer. She stepped over a fallen enemy, nodding the patch on his uniform, an unfamiliar insignia, black and gold. She slipped it into her pocket, another piece of a puzzle she didn't yet understand. They pressed on, nerves frayed. The ambush had cost them time and ammo. Worse, it had seeded doubt that might fracture the team. By late afternoon, clouds gathered on the horizon, dark and heavy. Thunder rumbled far off, a low growl rolling across the desert. The wind picked up, carrying the scent of rain and something else, smoke. At an abandoned watchtower they took shelter. The place smelled of rust and damp earth. Broken glass crunched underfoot. Novik leaned against the wall, rubbing his temples. "Whoever's feeding them our moves, they're good." Taran finally spoke up, her voice trembling. "You think it's someone here?" She didn't look at anyone directly. Reed shot her a sharp glance. "Don't start that." Maya spoke softly, steady. "We stick together. We don't accuse without proof." That's exactly what they'd want, distrust. But inside, doubt gnawed at her. What if the betrayal was closer than she dared admit? When night fell, rain lashed the tower's tin roof. Water dripped through a crack, pooling on the floor. Maya sat by a narrow window, watching lightning flicker over the horizon. The storm's roar reminded her of another night, years ago, when a mission had gone wrong and a friend had died screaming her name over the radio. She'd been too far to help, too silent. The memory pressed heavy on her chest. She wondered if she'd been wrong to keep so much locked away, the grief, the anger, the fear. She'd always believed silence was strength. But now, as thunder rolled and her team huddled in uneasy sleep, She wasn't sure. Novik stirred, glancing at her. You ever miss it, the world before all this? Maya didn't turn from the window. Every day. He sighed. Funny thing, I joined up thinking I'd find purpose. All I found was noise and moments of silence that scare me more. She almost smiled at that, almost. The storm eased toward midnight, leaving only the steady drip of rain. She listened to it, letting the sound anchor her. Tomorrow they'd have to move again, hunt for the stolen case, and somehow hold this fragile team together. As she finally closed her eyes, a single thought echoed. The silence between thunderclaps was never empty. It was a warning, a promise, a choice she'd have to make soon. She woke before the others, the storm's remnants still clinging to the sky. The world outside the watchtower was washed clean, the desert scrub glistening with rainwater that would vanish in an hour beneath the sun. For a rare, fragile moment, it was beautiful, so much so it almost hurt. Maya Vasquez slung her rifle across her back and stepped outside. The air was cold, sharp against her lungs. She crouched, running her fingers through the wet grit, grounding herself. Every mission morning felt like this, like a fragile thread between calm and chaos. Behind her, the tower creaked as Novik emerged, rubbing his eyes. You didn't sleep again, he said quietly. Didn't need to, she replied. He smirked faintly. You're terrible at lying. She didn't answer. Instead, she scanned the horizon. There, a thin plume of smoke barely visible against the dawn, not far, too deliberate to be chance. When the team was ready, they moved toward it, boots squelching in damp earth. The sun climbed, burning off the morning chill. The air was alive with tiny sounds, the drip of water from rocks, the distant caw of a raven, the low hum of wind through the canyons. Each sound seemed amplified, as if the desert itself was holding its breath. The smoke led them to a ravaged village, a scattering of mud-brick homes reduced to broken teeth jutting from the earth. The place smelled of charred wood and old grief. A child's doll lay half-buried in ash, its fabric blackened. Reed bent, brushing soot from its face. His expression hardened, but he said nothing. Taran stopped beside a doorway where a set of footprints led inside. Someone been here, recently. Maya nodded, her pulse quickening. She raised a hand, signaling silence. Inside the ruin, shards of sunlight cut through holes in the roof. She crept forward, her boots barely whispering against the dust. Then a sound, a cough, weak human. She raised her fist. The team froze. She followed the sound to a corner where a man lay against the wall, his uniform torn, blood dried on his sleeve. His eyes fluttered open, wide with fear. Don't shoot, he rasped in a language she half understood. His voice was brittle, on the edge of breaking. Maya knelt slowly. We're not here to hurt you. He swallowed hard. They took it. Her chest tightened. The case. He nodded faintly. They knew where. Someone told them, someone high. His breath hitched. They'll use it to turn your own against you. Maya's stomach dropped. She wanted to press him, to demand details. But his eyes rolled back, and the last breath escaped his lips like a whisper. For a moment, no one moved. Novik exhaled a curse under his breath. Well, that's comforting. Taran's voice trembled. He said someone high up, that means command. Reed's jaw clenched. Could be disinformation, could be he was delirious. Maya stared at the lifeless man, the words echoing in her mind. Turn your own against you. The possibility dug under her skin like glass. Outside, a crow called once, harsh and lonely. They buried the man quickly, a shallow grave in the soft earth. No words, just a moment of silence, heads bowed. As they trekked on, the sun climbed higher, heat pressing down like a hand. The terrain grew harsher, broken rock, dry gullies, the occasional twisted tree. They followed a narrow ridge that offered a sweeping view of the valley. Far below, columns of dust marked vehicles on the move. Too many. Too organized. Taran adjusted her comm unit, frustration flashing in her eyes. Still nothing. It's like the whole network's been severed. Novik muttered, or jammed. Maya kept her voice even. Either way, we're alone. The weight of that truth settled over them. They were four people in a vast, hostile desert, chasing a ghost of a trail and a stolen secret that could unravel everything. By late afternoon, their canteens were nearly dry. Reed stumbled slightly, catching himself on a rock. We need water soon. There's a ravine ahead, Maya said. It should hold runoff from the storm. But when they reached it, the ravine was dry, just cracked earth and the faint smell of damp stone. A flicker of despair crossed Taryn's face. She quickly looked away, ashamed to let them see it. Maya placed a hand on her shoulder. Hey, we've been worse off, we'll manage. Her voice was steady, but inside her own doubt whispered louder. As dusk approached, they made camp on a rocky ledge overlooking the endless horizon. The sunset bled crimson and gold across the sky, a beauty that felt almost cruel. They ate the last of their rations, the silence between them heavy but not empty. Novik broke it first. You ever think about walking away, just not doing this anymore? Reed snorted softly. Every damn day. Taryn's eyes glimmered in the firelight. Then why stay? Novik stared into the flames. Because if people like us stop showing up, who's left? The words lingered in the air, fragile and raw. Maya didn't speak. She just listened to the fire's crackle, the wind's low hum, the distant howl of something wild. She thought of her brother, of the day she'd promised herself she wouldn't let his death be meaningless. She thought of her mother's face, lined with quiet sorrow. The desert night deepened, stars scattered like shattered glass across the sky. Maya lay awake long after the others slept, staring upward. Somewhere out there, the stolen case was moving toward a purpose she couldn't yet see. Somewhere, someone she trusted had betrayed her. The silence around her was immense, but inside it her resolve took shape, sharp, unyielding. She would not let them fracture. She would not let this mission fail. Even if it meant her own voice would stay unheard a little longer. Even if it meant standing alone, against the weight of the unknown. She tightened the straps on her pack until they bit into her shoulders, the morning sun already a white-hot coin in the sky. The desert felt endless now, an ocean of heat and light that swallowed sound. Every step crunched over brittle stone. Every breath was dry enough to burn. Novik led the way along a ridge, his silhouette a dark slash against the horizon. Reed followed, shoulders hunched, conserving energy. Taryn lagged slightly, her lips cracked, her eyes rimmed red. Maya Vasquez kept them moving with small gestures. No words, not yet. She knew how words could splinter a team when they were this close to breaking. They'd been walking for hours when the valley below revealed something unexpected. A convoy. 4 trucks, 2 light armored vehicles parked in the shadow of a ruined fort. Maya dropped to a crouch, signaling the others to do the same. Through her binoculars, she saw men unloading crates, ammo, rations, equipment. But then she spotted it, a black case, identical to the one they'd been sent for. It was being hauled toward the fort's entrance. Her heart lurched. She exhaled slowly, steadying herself. Reed whispered, "That's it." Novik's jaw tightened, too many to hit head-on. Taryn's voice was barely audible. "We can't let them move it again." Maya's mind worked in quiet, measured beats. A frontal assault was suicide. Waiting for reinforcements wasn't an option. They had no comms. That left only one choice: infiltration. As they watched, a gust of wind swept sand across the ridge, rattling the dry scrub. Maya traced the fort's perimeter with her eyes. The north wall was partially collapsed, offering a potential entry point. But the open ground leading to it was exposed. They'd need a diversion. She turned to Novik. "You still carry those flash charges?" He nodded, 2 left. She outlined the plan quickly. Novik and Reed would circle west, draw attention with a single flash. Taryn would stay here, providing overwatch with her rifle. Maya would slip through the north breach, grab the case, and get out. No one argued. There was no time. As they prepared, Maya felt the familiar edge of fear, not the wild kind that makes you reckless, but the sharp, clean kind that makes you precise. It reminded her she was still alive. Minutes later, the flash charge went off, a burst of white light and thunder that echoed through the valley. Shouts rose from the fort. Figures scrambled toward the western perimeter. Maya sprinted, low and fast, across the open ground. The sun blazed against her back and her boots kicked up tiny storms of dust. She reached the collapsed wall and slipped inside, crouching among broken stones. The air smelled of old earth and gun oil. She could hear voices, urgent, overlapping. Footsteps clattered on metal stairs above her. The case was in the courtyard, propped against a crumbling column. Two guards remained, one smoking, the other scanning the horizon with bored eyes. Maya's heartbeat drummed in her ears. She waited, counting seconds. The smoker turned to flick ash. The scanner glanced westward, distracted by the commotion. She moved, a shadow among shadows, silent, precise. She slid behind the case, her breath shallow. With careful hands she lifted it, its weight heavier than she expected. She'd barely turned to retreat when a shout rang out. "Hey!" A burst of gunfire ripped through the courtyard. She dove behind a broken wall as bullets chipped stone inches from her head. "Maya," Novik's voice crackled through her earpiece, distorted but urgent. "We're moving back, get out now." She clutched the case to her chest and sprinted toward the breach. Bullets whined past her, snapping air. The desert wind howled as if urging her forward. She dove through the gap just as Reed's rifle barked from the ridge, dropping one of her pursuers. Tyron's voice came sharp over comms. "Two more on your tail." Maya hit the ground rolling, scrambled to her feet and ran. Sand sprayed behind her boots. The fort erupted in chaos, engines revving, orders shouted. But her silence was her shield. She didn't waste breath on curses or promises. She just ran. Novik and Reed met her halfway, covering her retreat with bursts of fire. Together they scaled a jagged incline, the case clutched tight in her arms. They didn't stop until the fort was a speck on the horizon, and the only sounds were their ragged breaths and the rasp of wind. They collapsed behind a boulder, hearts hammering. Novik gave a low, breathless laugh. "You're out of your mind." Maya allowed herself the ghost of a smile. "You weren't complaining when it worked." Reed leaned back, closing his eyes for a moment. "Tell me that thing was worth it." Maya glanced at the black case. She'd expected triumph, but what she felt was heavier, an unease she couldn't name. She flipped the latches. Inside were encrypted drives and documents, but something else caught her eye. A small metal tag stamped with a symbol she recognized. The same insignia from the ambushers' uniforms. Her breath hitched. This wasn't just stolen intel, it was bait. She closed the case, the click loud in the still air. "We need to move, now." As they shouldered their packs, she caught Taran's gaze. The younger woman's fear was naked now, no mask of discipline to hide it. "They're going to come after us," Taran whispered. "Yes," Maya said quietly, "but not just them. Someone hunting us from inside, too." The words hung heavy between them, a truth too dangerous to shout but too important to deny. They pushed on, the sun sinking toward the horizon, painting the desert in bruised gold and crimson. In the distance, thunderheads built again, dark and menacing. The day's heat faded, leaving a chill that crept into their bones. As darkness fell, Maya took the rear, scanning the desert behind them. Every shadow seemed a threat. Every silence felt charged. Her thoughts drifted, to her brother's last letter, to her mother's hollow voice, to the promise she'd made to herself. She would finish this mission. She would keep them alive. But as the wind whispered through the stones, another thought crept in, unbidden and cold. What if silence couldn't hold them together this time? She didn't speak it. She just walked, step after step, into the growing night. The storm had passed hours ago, but the valley still carried its echo, the soft drip of melting ice from a shattered ledge, the hiss of wind through charred pines. She stood alone on the ridge, her helmet tucked under one arm, the battered black Viper patch pressed between her fingers. Below, the extraction team moved like ants, loading crates of classified data and injured comrades into the waiting transport. But Maria stayed back, watching the horizon where the enemy gunship had gone down. The radio crackled softly at her hip. "Vasquez, we're ready to lift." The pilot's voice was steady now, the frantic edge gone. She didn't answer, not yet. Because the silence here wasn't emptiness, it was memory. Of the mountain's roar when the avalanche took half their convoy. Of Elena's trembling breath when she handed over the final targeting codes. Of Ray's whispering, "Get them home," before disappearing under snow and debris. She thought of her grandfather's words, a voice from childhood. "Silence isn't weakness, Mija. It's a weapon. It's where you decide who you are before the world tells you." For a long moment she closed her eyes. The ache in her shoulder reminded her she was still human, not the myth her Coulson would become after tonight. And beneath the ache was a quieter feeling, relief laced with grief, the bittersweet knowledge that survival wasn't the same as victory. Boots crunched behind her. It was Harper, the young comms tech who'd panicked on day one. He stopped a few feet away, hesitant. I wanted to say thanks for not giving up on me, for holding us together." His voice wavered. "I thought you were just, cold, silent." She turned slightly, enough for him to see the faint smile at the edge of her lips. "Silence doesn't mean cold," she said quietly. "Sometimes it means I'm listening. Sometimes it means I'm holding the line so someone else doesn't have to." Harper swallowed hard. "Guess I needed to learn that." He glanced down at the valley, then back at her. "We all did." The rotor wash from the first departing bird swept up dust and pine needles, rattling the burned branches. The sound reminded her of that first night's briefing, the laughter when she'd been overlooked, the disbelief when she'd taken command without raising her voice. She wondered how many of them would ever understand what it cost her. The years of being doubted, the friends lost to missions that no one would acknowledge, the pieces of herself she'd left in places like this. She whispered, mostly to herself, "This is the last piece I give." As she descended the ridge, she brushed her fingers over a broken rock face, a silent goodbye to the fallen. She didn't need to mark the spot or speak their names aloud. She carried them, always. The team watched her approach the chopper. Even the pilots, helmets on, seemed to pause. She stepped into the bird without ceremony. No speeches, no chest thumping, just a nod to Elena, who met her eyes with quiet understanding. As the helicopter lifted, the valley receded, a scarred, silent witness. Clouds broke open above, streaks of dawn filtering through. The light fell on Maria's face, softening the lines of exhaustion and resolve. No one spoke for a long time. Then Harper, almost in a whisper, said, "It's so quiet now." Maria looked out the window, the horizon stretching endless and uncertain. "Sometimes," she said, voice barely audible over the blades, "dignity doesn't speak." She touched the black Viper patch one last time, closing her fist around it. "It simply acts." The chopper banked east, disappearing into the pale morning. And in the valley below, the silence lingered, no longer weakness, but the echo of a roar that had held a mission together.